Starting from scratch in Space Haven can feel overwhelming. You open the build menu, see dozens of systems, and suddenly you start dreaming big and biting off more than you can chew. Building a starter ship becomes much easier once you stop thinking about the entire ship and instead focus on the core sections you actually need. So in this guide, I'll show you the framework I personally use when building a starter ship from scratch. Instead of randomly placing systems everywhere, we're going to divide the ship into specialized sections. The core station of your starter ship should focus on 6 things: hangar, power room, living quarters, bridge, engine room, and finally, the necessary industry needed to survive in space. Once these foundations are done, expanding the ship becomes much easier because every new system already has a place. So let's start with the most important section of an early game ship, the hangar. The first thing I build is the hangar. I usually place it near the bottom center of the ship because it creates a nice central logistics area for incoming resources and shuttle traffic. I also like extending one side slightly wider than the other so I can place the airlock there cleanly without blocking future expansion. At the beginning, your hangar is basically the spine of your ship. Everything starts here. Inside, I immediately place a few small pod hangars and several large storages nearby so resources can be picked up quickly from the airlock and dropped off efficiently. Then I place one shuttle hangar. I usually plan for 2 builder pods and 1 mining pod early on. This setup gives me enough flexibility to build aggressively while still having a miner available to gather ores. The power room. After building the hangar, the next thing I usually do is create a small utility room directly below it. This is where I place the system core, the power generator, and a thermal regulator. This tiny section is basically the heart of the ship. Once it's powered and stable, we can move on to the next section, living quarters. I usually place this section directly above the hangar. This becomes the crew's safe zone. So first, I start with an oxygen generator and a gas scrubber, and then I build the toilet facilities. After that, I create the kitchen and dining area. And lastly, the bedrooms. I like keeping these rooms separated with walls to maintain better comfort levels for the crew. One thing I recommend is giving this section enough room to expand later. At the start, you may only have a few crew members, but eventually, your tiny starter ship turns into a flying apartment complex. So planning ahead helps avoid ugly redesigns later on. The bridge. Next comes the bridge. I place this at the topmost section of the ship simply because it just feels right. The bridge gives the ship personality. At the start, you only really need the essentials: the navigation console and operations console. That's enough to keep the ship functional in the early game. I also place one point defense turret near the middle front section of the ship. This gives decent forward coverage against asteroids and other threats. I also like using some of the remaining bridge space for a small research lab. Engine room. Now we move toward the engine room. Personally, I start with 3 Hyperion hyperdrive engines so the ship can jump safely without risking overloads. I place one power node in the middle along with a gas scrubber and a thermal regulator because these engines sometimes produce smoke and heat after jumping. Then I place 2-point defense turrets, one on each side, to provide additional protection for the rear section of the ship. Industry section. Finally, after all the core systems are functional, you can start building the industry needed to survive long term. Personally, I start with hull stabilizer, tools facility, recycler, water purifier, medicine box, and water collector. And if I don't have enough tech blocks to build everything immediately, I simply dismantle less important systems temporarily to compromise. You can always acquire more tech blocks later through trading. The important thing is getting your ship self-sustaining as early as possible. Preparing for your first jump. Once everything is functional, you can start mining nearby asteroids or salvaging derelict ships within the sector. Transfer all your resources into your new ship. And once everything is ready, it's finally time to prepare for your first jump. Congratulations on building your first ship. Don't focus on creating the perfect ship immediately. Expand it one system at a time. Before you realize it, your tiny starter ship slowly becomes a real spacefaring vessel. This has been Nedum, and I'll see you guys in the next video.